Campbell, and I'm your host. Real Talk is a weekly radio show designed to address some of the most challenging issues confronting our community, including substance abuse and treatment, finding mentors, the real story about getting into law school or medical school, personal experiences with trying to get a criminal pardon, and so forth. Today's program focuses on the challenges confronting our youth, including the legislative approval of drug use and the use of deadly force. My guest today is Matthew Fogg. Today, Matthew is a law enforcement tactical expert on police brutality issues. He is a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal with 32 years of public service experience. He is known nationally for winning a landmark $4 million verdict against the U.S. Department of Justice back in 1998. And we'll get to that a little later. Welcome to the show, Matthew. I am so honored that you have arranged your schedule to come here today. We have a lot to talk about. So let's start with the rally where you spoke in Richmond with respect to the drug war.
Well, it's good to be here, and thank you for having me on your show. Yes, yesterday the Students for Sensible Drug Policies, it's an organization all over the United States with students at universities where they're talking about pretty much the same mission that another organization I'm a member of is called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And pretty much these are judges, lawyers, cops from around the country have gotten together and said the war on drugs is a failure and that we're spending trillions of dollars to fight this war, and it's not doing anything but perpetuating the violence in America. And that these students have gotten together, and they understand that as well. There's thousands of them all across the country, and they have these rallies to talk about the war on drugs. And yesterday's rally, and pretty much they look at the situation with marijuana and think everybody sees marijuana as a low-impact drug, but yet here it is, the government is spending millions of dollars to go out and attack marijuana users and go after these folks. And the students are saying enough is enough. And so they have myself and others, we come out and we spoke on it.
Okay, so what was your message there?
My message was pretty much the same. Was here it is, we right in the middle of this drug war. The drug war is super racist. As you know, if you heard my sort of direction is, if everything was all equal in the war on drugs, I call it an equal enforcement opportunity operation. We wouldn't be having this argument today because I think most of the politicians and folks that up on the Hill, they would simply say, you're not going to put my child away for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You're not going to have the impact on my community. So as long as it's not affecting them, they can keep saying, let's go after the drug dealers and the users.
Now we do know that today's gangs are more likely to use and sell drugs when we talk about the gang situation. Since medical marijuana has become a topic in the legislature in Maryland and has been approved in D.C., how likely will this be a problem in terms of finding its way in the wrong hands for those gangs who want to sell these drugs?
Well, again, they're doing it now. I mean, that's the whole thing. As long as it's illegal, it opens up a market for what we call violence. Market to say, hey, we find that nowadays in school, kids can get to marijuana before they can get to alcohol. They can get to any type. I mean, this drug is very easily accessible. And the bottom line is, we don't see it being perpetuated. We see it, matter of fact, decreasing the violence, decreasing the fact that, again, when we look at marijuana, we look at drugs, people are going to use them. They're going to get them. The United States is probably the largest demand for drugs than any place in the world. And so all of the fallout from it. So again, it's coming to that. It has to come to that because the bottom line is as people begin to understand the need to be able to say it is a medical issue. It's a medical issue. And matter of fact, we're using it for medical purposes to help people out. But the bottom line, if someone is addicted to a drug, whether it's marijuana, whether it's cocaine or crack or whatever it is, they need medical treatment and not incarceration.
Okay, so we know that is still going to be a hot button issue
right,
in terms of the use and who might have access to it, and also the issue of control. I had Senator Muse here talking about this very topic with respect to what's going on in Maryland, and I don't think that is something that we've heard the last of yet. So what is your message to legislators, given your experience in this area?
Well, my message to legislators is that the war on drugs is a human rights violation. It is a human rights violation, mainly from my perspective, because it's one of the most racist things that's ever come into this institution since slavery. Matter of fact, a recent report just reported says from 2004 to 2008, in every one of the 25 largest countries in the cities in California or around the country, blacks were arrested for marijuana possession at a higher rates than whites, typically at a double, triple, or even quadruple rate of whites, and blacks were arrested for simple marijuana possession far out of proportion to their percentage in the total population of the country. And the 25 largest counties in the whole blacks are 7% of the population, but 20% of the people arrested for possession. And these reports go on and on and on, talk about all of the other drugs and how pretty much just this war on drugs has devastated the black community, taking the fathers out of the home and so forth. So my problem with the war is, again, I keep going back to it. I look at it because if it was an equal enforcement opportunity operation, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. The congressmen, all of them would be simply saying, we got to figure out another way because our kids are going to jail and we're not putting up with that. And I wish they would do that with all Americans and just people that they know or they feel comfortable with.
Well, another issue that I want you to spend a moment to comment on also has to deal with this whole notion of violent crime and property crime. We have higher violent crime rates when compared with most other societies, but the incidence of property crime itself is much higher than violent crime. Primarily, one of the issues that stays in the mind of the average person, our listeners or the public, is because of the media sensation. If you were to poll, according to some of the recent social scientists, Ben Carruthers, for example, in his work, 75% of Americans say there's more crime in the United States. But in fact, from 1999 to 2008, violent crime decreased by 42%, and property crime decreased by 32%. And yet that perception persists. Right. And what can you say in terms of the role of the media in terms of how the ideas get expressed about crime, particularly with respect to race and so forth?
Well, you know, and again, and we're getting a little bit out of the law enforcement arena, but let me just say this about the media. Media is controlled by people, controlled by sponsors, controlled by folks who have an interest in what is presented and the angles that are presented. All you can do is go on TV and watch MSNBC and Fox News and the rest of them. You can see spins that are put out there all the time. So people are making money. People have to sell newspapers. They have to get folks' interest. So they have to put things out there that either and they put a spin on it where it addresses it the way they want it addressed. And we say it all the time. Pretty much anybody can look and understand that the war on drugs, if you just, I always say our prototype is prohibition against alcohol. When you look at that and you see the fallout from alcohol, and then you see what happens once they decided to just regulate it. And alcohol is one of the worst drugs in the world. But the bottom line is when you regulate it and you control it, and then you give treatment over incarceration, you have a better rate of success. And that's all we're trying to say with this whole war on drugs. Anybody can see, yes, if you got a person that you put a felony on them or you throw them in prison or whatever, and when they come out, they don't have no family support mechanism, and they come out, they got to survive. They're going to either burglarize, they're going to do something of that nature to survive. If you take the criminal penalties out of this thing across the board and start dealing with a treatment aspect of it, I think from there you will see crime will decrease. And then we can start having our law enforcement people to focus on the more violent crimes such as rape and robberies and burglaries and things of that nature that are more violent crimes. But I believe all of that's going to go down once you take the criminal penalties out of this whole war on drugs.
Well, I think that, it's an important point about, folks also being able to look critically at what they receive, not just in television, but also the print media and, all of these things in their communities when people start showing individual cases and then immediately making the jump to
Right.
think that this is something that is peculiar to a particular group, because we
Right.
do know, for example, that 70%, this is according to Uniform Crime Report statistics, 70% of those arrested for crimes are white, 28% are African American, and the remaining 2% are Asian American or Indian. But the big issue becomes African Americans make up only about 13% of the general population, but account for 29% of the violent crimes. So when we began to look at individuals being constantly portrayed in television or in other places as being people of color, people tend to make this view that somehow they are committing more crimes than others, when in fact it's just the disproportionality of that group with respect to their particular race. So we also know that offense rates are higher in inner city areas than suburban or wealthy areas and all of that. So I think that until, as you were saying, until we can really try to look at these data in a more honest way, that we're going to continue to have some issues around drugs as well as all these other types of crimes that are captured in the uniform crime reports. And we know that you and I could go on about this discussion
Right.
with respect to some of the limitations with the data that are collected by the police department with respect to the uniform crime reports. So, but I just wanted to make sure that our listeners are clear about sometimes some of these perceptions that are out here, particularly as we began to speak a little more about the case that is currently in the media, the Trayvon Martin case. But before we get to that, I want to talk about another hotly debated topic in Maryland, and that is this issue of casino gambling. Typically, those who support this type of gambling, for example, coming to National Harbor, often emphasize the revenue stream that could be generated from this, while opponents see this as a problem that could lead to other issues in the community as far as incidents of gambling addiction or opening the door to other illegal activity. Could you share your opinion with our listeners with respect to this issue, since it could become a law enforcement issue?
Well, again, it all comes back to revenue. The government is, the state is looking for ways to make money. And it's just like putting up all of these red light and speeding violation cameras. They're just looking to try to find anything they can do on the backs of the community to make money. And I think it's wrong. I think you shouldn't just simply go at it from that perspective. Now, you got to understand, if you put up a casino, of course, people have a right to go in and use it. That's what they want to do. But you got to realize that you're also going on the fact that a lot of folks have addictions. So you're pretty much opening up the door for them to be able to perpetuate their addictions. And then on top of that, when you're doing something like that, you're going to need more law enforcement. You're going to need security. When you're handling money and you're dealing with that type of operation, you're going to have a substantial amount of security, because you don't know what may take place, and you got to have enough impact or enough security there to make sure you can quell the situation. So when you add the monies up and the dollars up, I think somebody's looking at it saying, look, we don't like gambling. We may understand that maybe gambling can perpetuate these vices, but it's a quick way to make a dollar. And I think that's what pretty much the state is looking at.